While I was trying to hold my peace, I had no choice but to say something about the reporting by the corporate media on the Israel Hamas conflict. And what I realized what is being done is utterly irresponsible journalism and utterly despicable, especially after seeing the horrific events of southern Israel. You have guys like Piers Morgan, Jesse Waters, Sean Hannity, who refuses now to even call Cornel West a brother. He used to call him brother and mimic him and say, "Oh, hey, brother, how you doing?" Now he refuses to call him brother because he has a varying opinion or a different opinion to Alan Dershowitz or a different opinion to Sean Hannity. And Cornel West was specific. He said, look, we should condemn brutality and murder of civilians on both sides. Now tell me, what is wrong with that? What is wrong with what he's saying? If we are going to be intellectually honest, what is wrong with what he's saying? And therein lies the problem. No one is being intellectually honest about this issue. But instead, these irresponsible so-called journalists, because they have lost their integrity, okay? These so-called journalists are egging on war in the Middle East, as if they don't know what that will mean. Well, let me remind you, that would mean utter destruction of the Middle East and unraveling of the Middle East, okay? Or another 50 years of constant back and forth violence. Nothing you're doing, Mr. and Mrs. Corporate Media, nothing you're doing, okay, would lead to a path of diplomacy, peace, and stability in the Middle East. So stop it right now. Don't try to conflate, okay, people's support for the Palestinian people and civilians with their support, with any support for Hamas, because that's totally two different issues. I see what you're doing. You're trying to make it seem like there's only two sides in terms of opinion about this conflict. If you support Israel, then you're against the Palestinians. If you support the Palestinians, then you're against Israel. And that is entirely untrue. There's no monolithic support of the Palestinians, and there's no monolithic support of the Israelis. If that was the case, then how do you explain Jewish people, okay, going to the capital and protest what is going on in Gaza? Explain that to me, Piers Morgan. Explain that to me, Sean Hannity. Explain that to me, Jesse Waters. Explain that to me, the other journalists on CNN without integrity. Explain that to me. Then explain to me the people who support the Palestinian civilians and at the same time also understand the tragedy that took place in southern Israel. Explain that to me. Because there are people who take that stand also. But instead, in order, and you know, I know why you guys do it. You do it, okay, to divide the world. You do it to divide people. So that in the end, you yourselves can make profit off of this division. I also understand why the West will pretend that they have overwhelming support for Israel. Because I know it's an attempt at redemption. It's an attempt to cover up centuries of evil that was committed against the Jewish people. So now, in order to redeem yourselves, you got to overcompensate. But I want you to know, if history is any testament, that you have to realize that what you're doing is only going to lead to open, okay, and utter destruction in the Middle East. And there will be no turning back. So if that is your aim, then continue doing what you're doing with your lack of journalistic integrity. There was a time when the BBC, when CNN was run by Ted Turner and the BBC was run by responsible journalists. That time has long faded. And now, for corporate greed, you have descended into journalistic whoremongering. But I also understand in this world that in some respects, the Israelis and the Palestinians are pawns in a greater geopolitical chess game, as has always been the case with people that live in that particular area of the Middle East. It is time for you, as media personalities who have so much influence and power, to man up and woman up and start acting responsible so there can be some sort of semblance of peace in the Middle East and on this earth.